I'm Michael Fox, and this is the Prospector News Podcast. And I'm on location at the Association for Mineral Exploration in British Columbia's Roundup event in downtown Vancouver. And I'm sitting across from old friend Joe Kizis, who is the president and CEO of Bravada Gold. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me again.
It's always a pleasure to sit down and chat, and we've covered Bravada in the past, but for those people that might not be familiar with the company, let's give them a quick overview of who Bravada is.
Sure, we're an exploration group, basically a project generator. Um, we do some drilling ourselves, so we're not a pure end member. We're sort of a hybrid model. So we have a number of projects. We've had as many as 30 in Nevada. We focus on Nevada because it's a great place to find things, and we're finding large deposits even today. So it's a great place to work, and geology is such that there are a number of very, very attractive deposits. So back in 2004, we decided to take a portfolio approach to projects, and there were a number of things that I was interested in that we acquired. Like I said, we had as many as 30 different projects at one time. We've pared that down. We currently have 10 projects in Nevada scattered about. They're different levels of advancement. So our most advanced project is Wind Mountain, and we have a number of projects that have, potentially ore grade gold mineralization on them that hasn't been fully delineated. So got lots of potential.
Yeah, no, it's the interesting thing about Nevada. Every time you think it's played out, people find more and something else that's interesting about the landscape and the minerals in that state. Let's use Wind Mountain as an example of how you operate on a project and where your goal is to from start to where you want to transition it to someone else's hands, what that looks like, because Wind Mountain has kind of reached that point with your company. So let's do that.
Sure. Yeah, we picked that property up from Agnico Eagle, at a past producer. The ground became open. They picked it up. They didn't really think that would fit their portfolio ideas at that time. So we acquired it from them as an earn-in. And the reason we picked it up is because it's a high level system, what we call a hot springs type deposit. And most of the drilling was very shallow and had previous production on that shallow mineralization. There were no drill holes that were very deep. So we thought, well, we're going to find the feeder here, the high grade source of all that disseminated gold that goes all over the place. So we did do that. As we were exploring for that feeder, we've discovered that there was a lot of oxide mineralization that is still remaining. So the reason that project looks attractive is that there's almost no strip ratio. There are a lot of places where the gold comes out of the ground. It's not particularly high grade, but even by Nevada standards, but because it has so many other things going for it, it has a very high margin. So we basically drilled out portions of the deposit that were better, a little bit better grade, and sent that to an outside engineering company that did a resource update and a PEA. So what they came up with was basically about a 4-year program for one portion of the deposit that gave a 38% internal rate of return, produced gold at just over $1,000 an ounce, all in sustaining cost of just under $1,200 an ounce. So that covered 4 years of mining. We also had detailed drilling that fell into the same pit that we could put into a second drill pad. We found a site for a second drill pad, and it happens to be up downhill from some mineralization that we hadn't drilled out yet. So there's 4 years in the original phase 1. There's another 2 years in phase 2. There's probably another 2 to 4 years in other areas of the property. So basically, our thought is that as explorers, we've probably taken this most of the way, and what we need at this point is not more exploration, but an engineering group to, take a hard look. Should we be crushing? If so, what do you have to crush at? What kind of equipment you have? That's a whole different skill set than explorers use. So it's not really using our skill set, to the best benefit. And it's a place that there are a lot of good miners out there, right? So
Yeah.
what we're looking for now is to partner with that project and then focus our attention on some of the exploration projects that we have. During the low market times, we basically took a lot of the projects that we were excited about and developed them to the drill ready stage. So we have several projects that are basically drill ready. We permitted one of those called Highland, and it's a type of deposit that we know very well. And there's no drilling on, there aren't any drill holes into our target area. So we have a permit that we've just received last year, and depending on budget circumstances, we either drill or perhaps even get a partner on that project.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you said about being an explorer and taking the project, because that is something that a lot of investors don't necessarily understand, that the drilling, the exploration is one set of skills, but when it comes to the next set about determining the feasibility and the structure of a mine, those are completely different sets of skills. And a lot of companies, even internally, don't recognize that, and projects get hung up because they have the wrong set of skill sets on a project. They've taken it as far as they could, and they should probably be handing the ball off, and they don't. And that's comes from the wisdom of what you guys do. Where your lane is, and it's real important to an investor to understand that, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And Pierre Lassonde, who's a very, very successful investor, has something he calls the Lassonde curve, or at least other people call it that, but it's the value of a project versus time. And during the exploration stage, that's a very steep slope of adding value quickly. And then if that small company decides, well, now let's become a miner, usually the stock price drops. And why is that? Because it's a whole new skill set. The risks are different. You don't have the experienced people that do it. So we try to avoid that dip by saying, let's bring in a partner that takes that upside from the actual not exploration, but the development stage, and bring that skill set in and turn it over to them. You give up part of the project that way, but the alternative is to flounder and go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Or at least sometimes that's the
Well, ultimately,
unfortunate
I've seen the road riddled with mining companies
Yeah.
that got outside of their lane.
right. Yeah. I'm basically a geochemist, right? So I look at things as the chemistry of the fluids, how they change with time, and how geology affects that. And that's been very successful for me from the standpoint of exploration, because I try to understand that part of the system. Once it's outlined and we know what the mineralization is, it takes another set of skill to determine what equipment, how do you process it? How quickly do you process it? Because these are all things that are trade-offs. And without the skill level to know that if you go to the bigger size trucks, they're going to, they're not going to be able to get through the road together. Or, the crusher, well, we could have crushed it, a different type of process, crushed it more, crushed it less. These are all questions that are not in my skill set.
Yeah. Well, those are questions that, quite frankly, are beyond my pay grade, period. So
Right.
that's why I surround myself with smart people that know that stuff. So
Yeah. That's right.
as the company, then, essentially you're looking for a buyer for Windfall, and as you transition away from that, um, which of your other projects seems to be the most intriguing to move forward on in 2024?
Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily sell it outright. We would consider that, I suppose, but there's still some exploration potential on the project. So even, working in tandem, adding additional years of mine life while the initial years have been partially defined, refining those, that makes sense. So in answer to your question, our Highland project is probably the next one that we would drill. There is another target that is adjacent to a discovery that's being made that projects on our ground. We might divert some funds to put some holes in that, because eventually, if there is success there, that would involve us combining our project with some of the two surrounding other companies that are involved in that area. You'd be good to know what your value is on your part of the property before you enter those stages there. But, assuming that we were going to drill the next project, if I had my choice of any of them at this point, it would be our Highland project.
And why is that? What's the key there that makes that stand out from the other projects?
The key there is the understanding of the systems themselves. There's a very distinctive type of rock that occurs above where the gold should occur. And there's almost no gold ever associated with that. Sometimes you get a little leakage, and if you high grade some structures, you might get a little burp, but most of the gold has been depleted because it was dropped out to make a deposit at depth. So there might be 150 meters to 300 meters between the rock that you're seeing on the surface, that is the old paleo surface, and where the gold deposits are. So a lot of people in the old days, you come out and you look at this rock called center and say, well, there's no gold in this. Why would we drill it? And so they haven't been drilled. So a lot of these discoveries are being made under those type of deposits. The famous Midas deposit was, it had some historic mining, but really it was discovered, and it took 23 years from those high grade veins for a company, in this case it was Hecla, that went to the east 2 miles from where the mill site is and drill underneath some center there. Didn't have any gold in it, supposedly. I talked to some of the geologists. They say, well, yeah, I got a 0.3 gram number. People we can drill that in the past, but they're getting up to 5 ounce gold, 150 gram gold. And I don't know what the depth is, because they're not, they're not real free with their information at this point. But, here's a place that's right next to an operating mill. And it took 23 years before someone had the confidence to say, well, we should drill some holes under this. So the Highland is that way. We have some extensive area of center. You might think of like the Yellowstone hot spring system, and you join that. Well, those geysers in the pool around it, that forms a rock called center. And we now know a lot about the center, about the different thermophiles. Those are the microbes that live in that environment. And we can trace those from the outer edges of the pool to the center of the pool where the geyser was. We actually found a fossil geyser that's preserved on the Highland project.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So, we're excited about drilling under that and try to get down, a couple 100 meters to see if, we get a little bit of burp. And we do get some gold at surface there. There's the target that we would drill first has some float samples up to 14 grams, but there's quite a few half gram to gram and a half numbers that are in the area there. But people have drilled under those, but those have been lateral migration of the ore fluids, because you go through the center area into pretty fresh rock. So the key there is to figure out where those structures that brought the hot fluids up and drop their gold at a certain elevation before they got to the surface to form this center. Sounds confusing, and it is a little bit challenging to do, but that's the opportunity in Nevada. There are quite a few areas like that.
I was actually going to ask this question, but you kind of almost prefaced it. Like when you talk about these kinds of structures, it's almost like a leap of faith that the gold is there. Is there any particular telltale signs in advance that says that it's more likely than not?
I think in the case of Highland, on the west side of the property, the vein, there's more erosion. So you're actually seeing some of the veins at the surface. And we did drill a hole in 2003 that had some very high grade over nice thickness. And so we know that this is a gold bearing system, and we have gold that is leaking up. So, you know, when we specifically go in and do some very detailed sampling, they might be a little thin, narrow vein. And if it's got significant amounts of gold, basically what happens, you get a fault, right? And it periodically moves. And sometimes it moves a lot, and the gold fluids squirt up before they can deposit all their gold. So that's the leakage that we look for. And that tells us that there still may not be a gold deposit. You know, you have to drill to do that. Now they're usually what you do is you look for a system first. It's got gold with it. Then we look for the big structures. Now Nevada's had a lot of structures. We've got a lot of geophysics that tells us where the structures are. You pretty much have to drill a bunch of them. So it does take quite a bit of drilling. Fortunately, we do a lot of RC drilling as a first phase. It's quite a bit cheaper than core, but that's how you make discoveries. You know, it's a systematic approach, and you know, if you're in an area where there are active gold mines and you've got gold on the property, your odds are getting better and better.
Well, it's the old adage, you want to find a new mine, go to an old mine. So
yeah, no, that's very true.
Very much so. So if people want to follow this story as it breaks out and goes through 2024, how would they do so?
Yeah, well, our stock symbol is BVA.V, right? Bravada. Bravadagold.com is our website, so you can do that. Yeah.
Yes,
the way to do it.
This to me is like that mystery box that you have at Christmas under the tree. I'm really intrigued to find out what we're gonna find under those rocks. So I look forward to chatting with you as the drills start to turn.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Joe. Bravada Gold is a paid sponsor of the Prospector News. The host owns shares and warrants in Bravada Gold bought at the market for investment purposes. The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.